Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are peeling back the layers of one of the most consequential historical artifacts of the 20th century. We're going deep into the source material to reveal the hidden drivers, the secret ledger books, and the sheer imperial desperation that, quite frankly, fundamentally shaped the modern map. Let's dive right in.
67. That's it. The 1917 Balfour Declaration was literally just a 67-word letter from a British foreign secretary to a prominent banker expressing support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Now, the standard historical narrative usually frames this as a purely humanitarian or ideological gesture made right in the middle of a terrible war. But, that standard narrative leaves out a massive piece of the puzzle.
So we're taking a bit of a peeling the onion approach today, because the true catalyst behind those famous 67 words was actually the greatest financial catastrophe the British Empire had ever faced. We're talking about a massive global banking crisis, absolutely critical scientific shortages, and some incredibly cold, desperate imperial calculations. Part 1. Bankrupting an empire. Okay, so back in 1914, Britain was the undisputed global banker. It was the absolute center of this massive empire of credit, and the pound sterling reigned supreme. But within just 3 short years, that global supremacy was teetering right on the edge of the abyss. The sheer industrial scale of World War I was burning through British wealth at an absolutely unimaginable rate. Just look at this. Britain's national debt sat comfortably at around £650 million before the war. By 1917, it had exploded to nearly £7.2 billion. They were paying for their own wars, sure, but they were also bankrolling their allies, France, Russia, and Italy. To put that into perspective, between 1914 and 1919, their cumulative primary deficit hit 148% of their GDP. Britain was, for all intents and purposes, functionally broke. Just to survive, they were forced to rely incredibly heavily on American credit, specifically running up this gigantic overdraft at JP Morgan on Wall Street that reached nearly $400 million. And American President Woodrow Wilson saw this debt, and, he essentially used American money as a weapon. In late 1916, he actually ordered the Federal Reserve to halt foreign loans, which effectively blocked a massive $1.5 billion Anglo-French bond issue. By June and July of 1917, Britain literally came within hours of a total financial default. The mighty British war machine was on the brink of total collapse just months before the Balfour Declaration was drafted. Part 2. The chemistry twist. Now, finance wasn't their only problem. Britain was also facing a completely bizarre scientific crisis. They desperately needed acetone to make cordite, which is the smokeless gunpowder used in virtually every bullet and artillery shell at the time. They used to import calcium acetate from Germany to make it, but obviously with the war, that was completely blocked. The alternative was distilling wood, which, as you can probably guess, was highly, highly inefficient. Enter Chaim Weizmann. He was a brilliant biochemist and a very prominent Zionist leader. Weizmann invented this revolutionary fermentation process, using bacteria to produce acetone from starch. He essentially single-handedly solved Winston Churchill's desperate munitions crisis, securing the cordite needed for an unbelievable 248 million shells. And the kicker? Weizmann actually gave Britain the rights to his process without charging a dime for the patent. And that specific gift gave Weizmann unparalleled political leverage. He brilliantly parlayed his scientific access into this incredibly powerful emotional lobbying effort at the very highest levels of the British government. There's this super dramatic historical exchange where Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour challenged Weizmann's insistence on Palestine for a homeland. Balfour basically suggested a practical man should just take any suitable territory, saying, "We have London." And Weizmann fired back with, "That is true, but we had Jerusalem when London was a marsh." I mean, wow. It perfectly captures just how deeply Weizmann had penetrated the halls of British power. Part 3. 3 impossible promises. So, just to survive this financially devastating war, the British government started juggling some wildly contradictory secret deals. Between 1915 and 1916, Britain formally promised to support Arab independence in exchange for a critical revolt against the Ottoman Empire. Then, actually scratch that, During that same period, in May 1916, they secretly signed the Sykes-Picot Agreement, carving up the exact same territories for British and French imperial control. And then, finally, in November 1917, the Balfour Declaration promised a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. You heard that right. Britain promised the exact same piece of land to 3 completely different parties within a span of just 2 years.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the cold, calculated imperial logic driving it all. It was purely strategic. First, Britain wanted to rally influential Jewish communities in the US to push for American commitment and keep Russian Jewish soldiers fighting on the Eastern Front. Second, they desperately needed to secure the eastern flank of the Suez Canal, which was the absolute jugular vein of the British Empire, with a pro-British population. And third, and this was openly discussed in British cabinet meetings, by the way, they needed to signal to wealthy banking networks, like the Rothschilds, hoping to attract the critical war financing they needed just to stay afloat. But we really have to point out a staggering omission in all these strategic agreements. The Balfour Declaration referred to the people actually living on the land merely as existing non-Jewish communities. The source text notes this was a staggeringly dismissive phrase applied to the Arab majority, who at the time made up more than 90% of Palestine's population. It heavily underscores the demographic reality of the people living on the land that was just casually being traded away in these secret negotiations.
Part 4. A century of consequences.
You see, when an empire tries to buy its survival by promising other people's land, the financial center of gravity decisively shifts. Pre-war Britain was the world's undisputed creditor, the global banker. But post-war Britain, they emerged as the world's debtor. That financial center decisively shifted away from London to New York and from the pound to the US dollar. Their attempt to buy survival ultimately cost them their global financial supremacy. And that Palestine mandate they inherited to execute their wartime promise, well, it proved to be completely ruinous. It all unraveled violently. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, violence escalated rapidly under the immense weight of those contradictory British policies we just outlined. By 1936, the Great Arab Revolt erupted, which required massive and incredibly costly British military suppression. Fast forward to 1945, right after a Second World War, and Britain's national debt hit an all-time high of 249% of their GDP. They were heavily policing an ungovernable mandate that they simply could no longer afford. So in 1947, a completely bankrupt Britain essentially threw its hands up, handed the unmanageable mandate back to the United Nations, and physically walked away in abject failure. Look, it's really easy to fall into reductive conspiracy theories that claim Britain simply sold Palestine for cash. But the historical record reveals something far more complex. It's the messy, multi-layered reality of an empire literally fighting for its financial life. Desperate empires will promise anything to anyone to keep the creditors happy. They will sign contradictory agreements and trade away lands to survive a war they can no longer afford. Which leaves us with this final, really crucial question to ponder. What is the true compounding cost when desperate empires trade lands they don't own to pay debts they can't afford? Because the consequences of those 1917 ledger books, the secret promises, and all those desperate scientific and financial calculations, they are just history. They are the very foundation of the conflicts driving today's global headlines. Thank you so much for diving into this with me. Keep questioning the layers of history, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.